Have you ever noticed how quickly a day can begin before your spirit has even had a chance to arrive? The eyes open, the mind starts running, and before your feet touch the floor, the world is already making demands. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not come from work alone. It comes from waking into noise before we have remembered who we are. And one honest way to understand the wisdom in your original source is this: morning is not only a time on the clock, it is a doorway. It is the first inner conversation of the day, and that conversation quietly shapes everything that follows. So let us begin there, in that tender space between sleep and striving, before the phone lights up, before memory gathers its old sorrows, before fear begins its familiar whisper. There is a brief and holy pause in which the soul can turn toward reverence instead of reaction. Many people rush past that pause without realizing how much it matters. But sometimes the quality of a life is changed not by dramatic decisions, but by what we do in the first quiet minutes after waking. The original message speaks of gratitude first, and I believe there is deep mercy in that order. Not because gratitude is easy, not because pain disappears when we say thank you, but because gratitude gently returns us to reality. It reminds us that life is still here, breath is still moving, light is still breaking over the dark. And while none of that cancels suffering, it does place suffering inside a larger sky. There are mornings when gratitude comes like song, and there are mornings when it comes like survival. On some days, thank you, Lord, rises naturally from the heart. On other days, it drags itself up on tired knees. But perhaps that second kind is no less sacred. Perhaps the whispered thank you offered through grief carries a different kind of beauty because it is not based on ease. It is based on trust. That is an important distinction. Gratitude is not denial. It is not pretending your heart is not heavy. It is not calling loss a blessing before you have even had time to mourn it. No, gratitude, at its most honest, says, "This is hard, and still I will not surrender my capacity to see what is good. This hurts, and still I will honor the gift of being alive today. I do not understand everything, but I will begin from reverence rather than despair." What happens in a person when they begin there? Their vision changes, not all at once, not magically, but steadily. A grateful heart begins to notice what a bitter heart overlooks: the patch of sunlight on the floor, the warmth of a cup held in both hands, the ordinary mercy of being given another chance to begin again, the laughter that briefly returns to a house that has known too much silence, the body that is tired, yes, but still carrying you, the soul that is bruised, yes, but not destroyed. And maybe that is one of the quiet lessons of maturity. Life is rarely made of pure triumph or pure sorrow. Most days are stitched together from both. There may be a bill on the table and beauty at the window. There may be unanswered prayer and unexpected strength in the very same hour. Gratitude does not ask us to lie about the burden. It asks us not to overlook the mercy. Ask yourself this: what would change if the first voice I agreed with each morning was not fear, but thanks? Not because I have every answer, but because I still have breath. Not because the road is easy, but because I have not been abandoned on it. Sometimes healing begins with nothing more dramatic than learning to stop calling every difficult season empty. Some seasons are not empty at all. They are quiet. They are forming roots where no one can see. And when gratitude becomes practice, it does something else. It softens the inner ground. It makes the soul more teachable, more awake, less eager to live only from reaction. A person who begins a day with thanks becomes a little less ruled by what is missing and a little more aware of what remains. That awareness does not make them shallow. It makes them anchored. You do not need a perfect speech for this. You do not need polished faith. Some mornings, one honest sentence is enough. Thank you for this breath. Thank you that I am still here. Thank you that mercy has met me again. Those simple words can become a kind of inner shelter. They can gather the scattered parts of you and remind you that your life is more than your stress, more than your wound, more than the unfinished ache you carried to bed the night before. And once the heart has been steadied by gratitude, it becomes ready for the next sacred work. To choose what truth it will carry into the day and what words it will allow to shape its inner world. That is where we must go next. Because after the soul learns to say thank you, it must also learn how to speak life with intention. There is a reason the world tries to speak to you so early. Before breakfast, before your body has fully awakened, before your deeper self has taken its seat within you, noise begins its work. News, memory, comparison, regret. A sentence somebody said years ago that still lingers like smoke. A private fear that returns every morning wearing a different coat. This is why the second movement in your original source matters so deeply. After gratitude, there must come a decision about language. What will you let define you before the day has even begun? Many people imagine that spiritual strength begins with emotion. They think they must first feel brave in order to speak bravely, feel peaceful in order to speak peace, feel whole in order to speak from wholeness. But often it happens the other way around. Sometimes the soul must hear truth before it can emotionally rest inside it. Sometimes the mouth must lead the heart back home. That is why the practice of speaking sacred truth in the morning is not empty repetition. It is orientation. It is how a human being remembers where they stand. The world offers labels quickly and carelessly. It tells you what your failure means. It tells you what your appearance means. It tells you what your age means, what your past means, what your grief means, what your waiting means. And if you are not watchful, you will wake each morning and unconsciously inherit those definitions as though they were your own voice. But they are not your own voice, and they are not the deepest truth about you. One honest way to understand this practice is to see it as a refusal to let your identity be built by the loudest fear in the room. When you speak a deeper truth over your life, you are not pretending difficulty does not exist. You are refusing to let difficulty become your name. There is a difference between saying, I am facing fear, and I am nothing but fear. There is a difference between saying, I am in a hard season, and my life is only lack. The first tells the truth about experience. The second surrenders identity. This is why words matter so much. They are not decoration, they are direction. They do not simply describe the life within you. Over time, they help shape how you inhabit it. Think of how often people rehearse their wounds without meaning to. I always ruin things. Nothing good stays. I am too broken. I will never change. Nobody truly sees me. Some of these sentences are not lies in the sense that they come from nowhere. They often rise from real pain. They have history behind them. But pain can be sincere and still be incomplete. A wounded thought can feel true and still not deserve permanent authority. So the morning becomes a place of gentle correction, not harsh correction, not self-scolding, but a return, a remembering, a way of saying to the soul, you will not begin the day as an orphan to fear. You will begin the day under truth. What might that sound like in ordinary human life? It may sound like this: I am still loved, even in my uncertainty. I am not disqualified by my weariness. I do not need to despise where I am in order to grow. I can meet this day with steadiness. I can carry pain without becoming cruel. I can be honest without becoming hopeless. I can be tender without becoming weak. Notice how these words do not promise a fantasy. They do not say everything will immediately turn around. They do something wiser. They place your inner life in alignment with dignity. They remind you that your worth is not decided by the mood of the morning, the opinion of the crowd, or the fact that your healing is still unfinished. And yes, there are days when such words feel awkward in the mouth. There are mornings when truth sounds far away, when the heart says, I cannot honestly say that yet. But perhaps sincerity does not always mean emotional agreement. Perhaps sometimes sincerity means willingness. Willingness to stand near the truth before you fully feel it. Willingness to repeat what is life-giving until the nervous system begins to trust it. Willingness to let sacred language interrupt old inner violence. Ask yourself, what have I been repeatedly saying to myself that is making my spirit smaller? That question matters. Because what we repeat in private often becomes the architecture of our days. A person who continually speaks defeat to themselves may begin to live with the posture of surrender long before any real defeat has arrived. A person who practices grounded truth, however quietly, may begin to carry themselves with a steadiness the world cannot easily explain. This is not about becoming grand or untouchable. It is about becoming rooted. There is a great difference. Rooted people do not deny storms. They simply draw from deeper ground. The original source also points towards something beautiful. Truth spoken aloud has a different weight than truth merely admired from a distance. We live in a time when many people collect wise phrases but do not inhabit them. They save them, post them, underline them, nod at them, and still go on speaking to themselves with contempt. But healing asks for more than appreciation. It asks for participation. If a true word is worth reading, it may also be worth carrying in your own mouth. So tomorrow morning, before the old narratives gather at the door, choose one line of living truth and stay with it. Not 20. One may be enough. I am held, even here. I will not agree with despair. I am still becoming. My life is not finished. Let it meet you at the mirror. Let it travel with you into the kitchen. Let it stand beside you while you answer the ordinary demands of the day. Over time, what you repeatedly speak with honesty begins to form a new inner atmosphere. And once that atmosphere begins to change, something else becomes possible. The heart that has learned gratitude and the mouth that has learned truth are now ready for deeper communion. Because there comes a moment when words spoken over life must become words spoken to the one who can hold that life completely. That is where we turn next. into the quiet, necessary intimacy of prayer. Prayer begins where pretense ends. It begins in the unguarded place, in the place where your voice is not trying to impress, explain, defend, or perform. The original source turns naturally in this direction, and that movement matters, because after gratitude has softened the heart and truth has steadied the mind, the soul is ready to speak more personally, more honestly, more directly to God, not as a public act, not as a performance of holiness, but as a relationship that can hold what no one else fully understands. There is a loneliness many people carry that has nothing to do with whether they are surrounded by others. It is the loneliness of being unable to say the deepest thing aloud, the fear beneath the irritation, the grief beneath the busyness, the exhaustion beneath the smile. Prayer offers a place where those layers do not need to remain hidden. It is one of the last honest rooms left in a world that rewards masks. And perhaps that is why morning prayer can feel so sacred. At that hour, you are often closest to yourself. You have not yet fully put on the face the day requires. You have not yet become efficient, agreeable, composed, useful. You are simply there, human and unfinished, carrying yesterday's ache and today's uncertainty in the same fragile hands. To bring that self into prayer is already an act of courage. Many people have been taught to think of prayer only as asking for protection, asking for help, asking for provision, asking for healing. And of course, there is nothing small about asking. Need has its own dignity. But prayer is deeper than request. It is communion. It is consent. It is the soul saying, I do not want to walk through this day alone. It is not merely give me what I want. It is also meet me where I am. Steady what is frightened in me. Clarify what is clouded in me. Teach me how to carry this life with more grace. That kind of prayer changes a person even before circumstances change. Why? Because the act of honest prayer interrupts isolation. It reminds you that your interior life does not need to remain a locked room. It places fear in a larger presence. It gives language to what might otherwise harden into confusion, resentment, or despair. Sometimes a burden grows heavier simply because it has remained unnamed for too long. The soul tires from carrying what the mouth refuses to bring into the light. So say it. Say the thing that embarrasses you. Say the thing that makes you feel childish, needy, ashamed, uncertain. Say the prayer that does not sound polished. Say the truth you would never put in a caption or speak in a crowded room. I am angry. I am afraid. I am tired of pretending I am stronger than I feel. I do not know what to do next. I miss who I used to be. I do not understand why this still hurts. Help me be honest without falling apart. Help me trust without becoming numb. That, too, is prayer. One of the gentlest revelations in a spiritual life is learning that God does not require elegance in order to receive you. Many people delay prayer because they believe they must first become composed enough, faithful enough, grateful enough, clean enough. But perhaps prayer is not the reward for already being centered. Perhaps prayer is one of the ways we become centered. We do not go to God because we are already whole. We go because some part of us is still trembling, And there are days when even words feel too heavy. On such days, silence can also be holy. Tears can also be holy. A long exhale with no clear sentence attached can also be holy. Sometimes the deepest prayer is not a paragraph, but presence, remaining there. Not fleeing yourself, not fleeing God, just staying long enough for the nervous system to remember that it does not have to survive the day alone. Ask yourself this: when was the last time I spoke to God with my real voice? Not my religious voice, not my polite voice, not the version of me that knows what should be said. That question can uncover a great deal, because intimacy begins when honesty returns. And many souls are starving not for more information, but for a more truthful relationship with the divine. Prayer in the morning does something else as well. It establishes inner order before outer pressure arrives. It is a way of placing the day in larger hands before the machinery of expectation begins to grind. The emails may still come. The bills may still be real. The family tension may not vanish by noon, but something within you has already bowed toward peace. Something within you has already remembered its source, and that memory becomes a kind of shelter. This is not about escaping responsibility. It is about carrying responsibility without letting it devour your humanity. Prayer does not make you less present to life. It can make you more present, because you are no longer trying to carry everything through willpower alone. A prayed through morning may not remove difficulty, but it often changes the quality of your presence inside difficulty. You become less reactive, less brittle, less likely to confuse urgency with wisdom. And in time, prayer also teaches listening. Not always for grand revelations, not always for dramatic certainty. Sometimes what comes is simpler and no less sacred. A quiet restraint, a needed tenderness, an unexpected calm, a sentence of guidance that arrives gently and stays. Morning prayer trains the heart to recognize that not every answer comes as thunder. Some arrive as steadiness. And once the soul has learned this rhythm of honest communion, something begins to flow outward, because no real prayer remains sealed inside the self forever. What is received in secret eventually asks to be lived in public. The person who has truly met God in the quiet morning will sooner or later be invited to carry that presence into human relationships, which brings us to the next turning: the discipline and the beauty of walking in love. To walk in love sounds beautiful until it becomes inconvenient. It is easy to admire love in principle and much harder to practice it when the world has been unkind, when your own heart is tired, when someone has misunderstood you, dismissed you, or touched an old wound without even knowing it. This is where the wisdom of your original source becomes especially human. After gratitude, after truth, after prayer, it does not lead into something grand and abstract. It leads into how we treat people. And that is where so much real spirituality is tested. There is a kind of faith that sounds beautiful in private, but never ripens into tenderness. It knows the language of devotion, but not the labor of mercy. It can speak of peace and still leave bruises wherever it goes. But love is the measure that quietly reveals what has truly taken root in us. Not sentimental love, not performative kindness, not the kind of goodness that wants to be seen being good. I mean the harder, quieter love that asks, How shall I move through this day in a way that leaves less fear, less shame, less heaviness in the lives I touch? That question can change a life. Most people begin the day asking some version of, what do I need to get done? What do I need to protect? What must I survive? Those are not foolish questions. Life is demanding, but love adds another one. Who might need gentleness from me today? And suddenly the day is no longer only about performance, it becomes about presence. This matters because many people are living with invisible injuries. The cashier who looks distracted, the coworker whose voice is sharper than usual, the family member who keeps disappointing you, the stranger who seems cold, the friend who has gone quiet. We do not always know what has happened inside another person before they arrive before us. Sometimes what we call attitude is grief. Sometimes what we call distance is fatigue. Sometimes what we call weakness is a person trying not to break in public. Love does not mean becoming naive about harm. It does not mean letting people use you, erase you, or trespass endlessly across your peace. Love without wisdom becomes self-abandonment, and that is not holy. But neither is cynicism. The deeper path is to become both tender and discerning, to remain kind without surrendering clarity, to protect your soul without hardening your heart. That balance takes practice. One reflective question worth asking in the morning is this: can I be soft without becoming unclear? Many people think they must choose between love and strength, but mature love joins them. It knows how to speak truth without contempt. It knows how to decline without cruelty. It knows how to leave a harmful place without poisoning itself with revenge. Sometimes love looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a boundary spoken with a steady voice. That, too, is kindness. The original source honors ordinary acts of mercy, and I think that is important. We often imagine that spiritual greatness belongs to dramatic gestures, yet most of life is built from the small, repeated choices no one applauds. The held door, the softened tone, the text sent at the right time, the apology offered without self-defense, the refusal to humiliate someone when you could have, the willingness to see another human being as more than the moment in which they failed you. These things may seem minor, but they shape the moral atmosphere around us. And love, when it is real, does not depend entirely on whether it is returned. That may be one of the hardest lessons of all. Many people know how to be warm when warmth is mutual. Fewer know how to remain decent when disappointment enters the room. Yet it is in that very place that character is refined, not by becoming endlessly available to hurt, but by refusing to let another person's lack of grace become permission for your own. Ask yourself honestly, who have I become in response to what has wounded me? That is not an accusation, it is an invitation, because pain can quietly train us into habits we never intended. A betrayed person may become suspicious of everyone. A dismissed person may become hungry to dominate. A neglected person may begin withholding affection as punishment. A shamed person may become quick to shame others. Hurt that is not examined often leaks into love. So part of walking in love is learning to notice when our reactions are coming from yesterday rather than from wisdom. Not every sharp reply is truth. Not every withdrawal is peace. Not every act of self-protection is healing. Sometimes we are not setting a boundary. We are building a wall. Sometimes we are not being honest. We are being harsh. Sometimes we are not guarding our heart. We are refusing vulnerability because it feels safer to stay defended than to stay human. This is why prayer must become character. It is not enough to feel spiritual in solitude if our presence leaves people more afraid to be human. Love is where the inner life proves its sincerity. And yet, let us be gentle here too. To walk in love every day is not easy for a tired soul. There are mornings when kindness feels costly, when your own reserves are low, when all your inward strength is being used just to remain upright. On such days, love may not look expansive. It may look very simple, speaking less instead of lashing out, pausing before answering, choosing not to make your pain someone else's burden, offering one small mercy while your own heart is still recovering. That counts. That matters. Because love is not only a feeling, it is a discipline of attention, a way of remembering that every person you meet is carrying some private weather. It is the willingness to move through the world without adding unnecessary cruelty to the air. And when practiced over time, love begins to heal the one who gives it to. Not instantly, not in a sentimental way, but there is a strange grace in becoming the kind of person whose presence makes life more livable for others. Something in the soul straightens when it begins to live that way. And from there, another question rises naturally. If love is not merely a mood but a daily discipline, then how do we sustain it when the world is loud, when our emotions are unstable, when our minds are crowded, and when old habits keep returning? To answer that, we must turn to the inner architecture of consistency, the quiet habits that shape not just a morning, but a life. What makes a life holy is rarely intensity alone. It is rhythm. It is what returns. It is what you come back to when no one is watching, when no one is praising you, when you are tired, when you are tempted to call one small act insignificant and skip it all together. Beneath the beauty of your original source is this deeper teaching. Morning habits are not meant to impress heaven. They are meant to shape the soul into steadiness. That is worth sitting with for a moment, because many people live in cycles of inspiration and collapse. They are moved deeply one day, then scattered the next. They make grand promises to themselves at night and wake without the inner structure to keep those promises company. And after a while, inconsistency begins to wound their self-trust. They do not only feel disappointed, they begin to feel divided from themselves. But gentle, repeated practice can repair that division. When you rise in the morning and return again to gratitude, truth, prayer, and love, you are doing more than performing a spiritual routine. You are teaching your inner life what home feels like. You are telling the mind there is a place we return to. You are telling the nervous system we do not begin in chaos if we can help it. You are telling the heart you do not have to wait for a crisis to become sincere. There is a quiet dignity in repetition. The world often celebrates novelty, breakthrough, reinvention. But much of healing is not dramatic. Much of healing is returning to what is life-giving often enough that it becomes familiar. A person does not become strong because they had one powerful morning. They become strong because they kept choosing what nourished them, especially when they did not feel especially luminous or inspired. Ask yourself, what have I been doing repeatedly that is forming me without my permission? That question can open a door. Because everyone lives by habits, whether chosen or unconscious. Some wake and immediately reach for comparison. Some wake and begin rehearsing dread. Some wake and enter the day already apologizing inwardly for existing. Others, slowly and imperfectly, train themselves into a different beginning. They make space for reverence before reaction. Over time, that space becomes a kind of inner sanctuary. And let us be honest, consistency is often tested not on beautiful mornings, but on difficult ones. The real question is not whether you can be spiritually attentive when the sun is soft and the heart is calm. The real question is whether you can return to one honest practice when you are weary, discouraged, or emotionally crowded. On such mornings, your ritual may become very small, a single sentence of thanks, one line of truth, a minute of prayer spoken from the edge of your bed, one clear intention to move through the day without cruelty. That is enough to begin. Perfection is not the requirement. Return is. This matters because many people abandon a good practice the moment they cannot do it beautifully. They miss a morning, then miss a week. They lose the ideal version of the routine and decide it no longer counts. But a deeper wisdom says otherwise. A life is not built by perfect streaks. It is built by merciful recommitment, by beginning again without turning self-discipline into self-punishment, by understanding that devotion can be faithful without being theatrical. There is another grace hidden in consistent morning practice. It lowers the volume of self-betrayal. When you make even a small daily space to come home to your values, your prayers, your deeper identity, you become less likely to hand yourself over entirely to the moods of the moment. You may still feel anger, envy, fear, sorrow. Of course you will. But those emotions are less likely to become the ruler of the day when your morning has already reminded you who is meant to lead. And that reminder creates coherence. The grateful heart, the truth-speaking mouth, the praying spirit, the loving presence, these are not separate performances. They begin to work together. Gratitude softens you. Truth steadies you. Prayer grounds you. Love extends what has been received. And consistency weaves them into character. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly at first, you become someone whose mornings are not merely survived, but inhabited. What a beautiful thing it is to become inhabitable to yourself. To wake and not immediately abandon your own soul. To begin the day in a way that says, I belong to something deeper than pressure. I will not let fear name me before reverence does. I will not let the world enter first and define the quality of my spirit. This is not rigidity. It is self-respect in sacred form. And still, even with the best intentions, there will be mornings when you fail the rhythm. You will oversleep. You will rush. You will forget. You will begin in anxiety and remember your deeper ground only halfway through the day. That does not mean the practice has failed. It means you are human, which is why the next layer of wisdom matters so much. How to meet yourself when the morning has not gone as planned. And how to begin again without shame. There is a quiet cruelty many people practice against themselves, especially in spiritual life. The moment they fall short, they become harsher than truth requires. They miss the morning they meant to protect. And instead of simply returning, they begin accusing, I failed again. I never stay consistent. I am too distracted, too weak, too undisciplined. And just like that, one imperfect morning becomes a verdict about the whole self. But one of the deeper lessons hidden inside your original source is that these habits are meant to draw us toward God, not drive us into shame. Shame is a poor teacher. It may force a person for a while, but it cannot nourish transformation. It exhausts the soul, narrows the heart, and turns devotion into performance. Many people do not quit meaningful practices because they do not care. They quit because they have made the inner standard so punishing that every small failure feels like exile. After enough of that, the soul stops reaching. Mercy restores the reach. This is why beginning again matters so much. Not beginning once in a dramatic moment, but beginning again and again, quietly, humbly, without fanfare. The person who knows how to return without self-contempt possesses a rare kind of strength. They understand that consistency is not the absence of interruption. It is the courage to come back after interruption. It is the willingness to re-enter the sacred without first demanding perfection from oneself. Perhaps this is one of the great mature graces, to stop confusing spiritual sincerity with flawless execution. Some mornings will be tender and full. Others will be rushed, distracted, uneven. On some days, gratitude will rise easily, truth will sound alive, prayer will open like a clear window, and love will feel close at hand. On other days, your spirit may feel dry, your attention fractured, your emotions uncertain. The practice still matters. In fact, it may matter most then. Why? Because the deeper purpose of these habits is not to prove how devoted you are on your best days. It is to teach you how to stay connected on ordinary and difficult ones. Ask yourself this with gentleness. What do I do when I disappoint my own ideals? Do I return to myself, or do I abandon myself? That question reaches far beyond morning ritual. It touches the whole architecture of healing. Many people learned early in life that mistakes cost them belonging, that failure invited withdrawal, criticism, coldness, or shame. So now, even in private, they recreate the same punishment. They become the very voice that once wounded them. But a wiser inner life chooses another way. It says, yes, I forgot. Yes, I rushed. Yes, I began today in confusion. But I am still allowed to pause now. I am still allowed to speak one grateful sentence now. I am still allowed to tell the truth now. I am still allowed to pray now. I am still allowed to choose love now. That little word now can save a day. Because one of the enemy's oldest tricks against the soul is delay through discouragement. If the morning was missed, he says the whole day is spoiled. If your mind wandered during prayer, he says your prayer was empty. If you spoke harshly before noon, he says kindness is no longer yours to practice honestly. But this is not wisdom. This is despair disguising itself as accuracy. Real spiritual wisdom always leaves the door open for return. And return changes the atmosphere inside a person. Instead of living under the tyranny of all or nothing, you begin to live under grace and responsibility together. Grace says, You are not disqualified by imperfection. Responsibility says, come back anyway. These two belong together. Grace without responsibility becomes drift. Responsibility without grace becomes brutality. But together, they create a life that is both disciplined and humane. This is especially important for people who have spent much of their lives being strong for others. Such people often know how to perform reliability outwardly while carrying deep inner fatigue. They may even turn spiritual practice into another burden, another place where they must get everything right. But morning devotion was never meant to become one more arena of self-pressure. It was meant to become rest for the soul, a return to center, a daily clearing of the inner room. So let the practice be alive, not rigid. Let it breathe. Some mornings you may linger long in silence. Some mornings you may only have 3 quiet minutes. Some mornings you may journal. Some mornings you may simply stand at the sink, watching the light arrive, whispering one honest prayer over the sound of running water. God is not measuring elegance. The sacred is not offended by your humanity. What matters is that your heart keeps finding its way back. And over time, this repeated return teaches something profound. You are not only loved when you are spiritually composed, you are also met in your incompleteness, in your distraction, in your half-formed prayer, in your effort to begin again. That realization can soften a person at the roots. It can teach them to live with greater tenderness toward themselves and, by extension, toward others. Because people who know how to receive mercy often become less severe in the world. They stop demanding impossible perfection from everyone around them. They become slower to condemn, quicker to understand, steadier in love. They recognize that all of us are learning, missing, returning, trying again, and that awareness can make a human being much more gracious to stand beside. So if tomorrow morning unfolds beautifully, be grateful. And if it does not, be gentle and return. Begin at noon if you must. Begin in the car. Begin in the hallway between tasks. Begin after tears. Begin after anger. Begin after forgetting. The sacred is not only waiting at dawn, it is waiting wherever honesty returns. And when a person has learned that when they know how to begin with gratitude, speak truth, pray honestly, walk in love, practice consistently, and return without shame, then something deeper than routine has been formed. A way of living, a way of belonging to the day, a way of carrying the soul with reverence. That is where we must go in the final part. Toward the larger meaning, these quiet morning choices create across a life. In the end, these morning habits are not only about mornings. They are about the kind of person you are becoming while no one is looking. They are about the atmosphere you create inside yourself before the world arrives with its noise, its pressure, its hurry, its endless invitations to forget your own depth. Your original source offers these practices as habits that please God, and one beautiful way to understand that is this: what pleases God is not performance, but a heart that keeps turning toward what is true, tender, and alive. A grateful heart pleases God because gratitude keeps wonder from dying. It keeps the soul from becoming so burdened by what is missing that it can no longer recognize what has been given. A truth-speaking mouth pleases God because truth restores dignity where fear has tried to distort identity. A praying soul pleases God because prayer is relationship over isolation, presence over pretending, surrender over self-protection. A life that walks in love pleases God because love is the visible shape of inward faith, and a spirit that returns again and again, even after forgetting, pleases God because return is one of the purest forms of trust. Taken together, these practices do more than improve the mood of a morning. They reorder a life. They teach you to stop beginning the day in emotional homelessness. They teach you that your first moments do not have to belong to panic, comparison, resentment, or mental noise. They teach you that your inner life deserves tending before it is spent, that your soul is not a machine built only for output, that reverence is not wasted time, that pausing is not laziness, that a human being can live from a deeper center than urgency. And this matters because what you repeatedly do at the threshold of the day slowly becomes the tone of your life. A person who begins again and again with reverence may still know sorrow, still face difficulty, still carry unanswered questions, but they often begin to carry those things differently. Their spirit becomes less frantic, their reactions become less automatic, their peace may not be loud, but it becomes more durable. Their kindness becomes less dependent on perfect conditions. Their sense of identity becomes less vulnerable to every passing disappointment. They grow roots. That is the word I keep returning to here, roots. Morning habits, when practiced with honesty, do not make you flashy. They make you rooted. And rooted people have a quiet power. They do not need to prove themselves in every room. They do not break at every change in weather. They may bend, they may grieve, they may tremble, but they are not so easily uprooted by every opinion, delay, failure, or fear. Something in them has learned where to draw water. Perhaps that is what many of us are truly longing for. Not a life without pain, but a life with deeper grounding. Not constant inspiration, but inner steadiness. Not a dramatic identity, but a trustworthy one. Not escape from difficulty, but a way of meeting difficulty without losing tenderness, truth, or self-respect. So when tomorrow comes, you do not need to become someone else in order to begin well. You do not need a more impressive personality, a better past, a cleaner story, or a more disciplined soul than the one you currently have. You only need willingness, willingness to pause, willingness to whisper thank you before the day hardens around you, willingness to place one true word in your own hearing, willingness to pray with your real voice, willingness to let love become visible in small acts, willingness to return when you forget. And that return, over time, becomes its own kind of testimony. It says, I have not given up on my inner life. I have not handed myself over completely to noise. I have not let pain decide the whole meaning of my days. I am still learning how to live from the deeper place. I am still becoming someone who can carry both tenderness and strength. I am still available to grace. There is dignity in that. There is wisdom in that. There is a quiet holiness in choosing again and again not to abandon your soul at the edge of the day. So let your mornings become less about achieving a perfect ritual and more about remembering what matters. Let gratitude be the soft opening of your heart. Let truth be the steadying of your mind. Let prayer be the unguarded meeting of your soul with God. Let love be the shape your faith takes in the world. Let consistency teach you trust. Let mercy teach you how to begin again. And if some mornings are beautiful while others are broken, let that be human. The sacred can meet you in both. What matters most is not whether every dawn feels luminous. What matters is that somewhere within the ordinary, you keep making room for reverence. You keep making room for honesty. You keep making room for God. And in that room, little by little, a stronger, gentler, wiser life is formed. May you meet tomorrow with more tenderness than fear. May you carry yourself with more truth than shame. May you remember that even your small, faithful choices matter. And may you discover in the quiet first moments of the day that there is a deeper dignity in living slowly enough to hear your own soul return.